why do we always have to ask for the help? Why don't they just see it that it needs to get done? You just sometimes need to ask.
There is this guilt for a lot of moms to make sure that everyone else is happy first.
It's so true, and it's hard to do.
Oh, it's impossible. Yeah.
Jamie Martin is the editor-in-chief of Experience Life magazine and vice president of the content strategy at Lifetime Inc., where she leads a team of 17 to create award-winning health and wellness content across print and digital platforms. With nearly 2 decades at the publication, from intern to executive editor, Jamie has become a trusted voice in the wellness space. She also co-hosts the Lifetime Talks podcast to share insights on fitness, health, and authentic living. Outside of work, Jamie is a passionate advocate for rare disease awareness, drawing from personal experience to drive meaningful change in newborn screening.
Sometimes you have to just sit on a hammock and look up at the sky and look at the cloud. In theory, it sounds amazing, but I struggle to actually do it.
If I'm not doing something, I feel like, am I being lazy or whatever that looks like? And it's not. It's actually really good for us. It's about being who you truly are and knowing it's going to evolve over time. But then when you look back at where you were 10 years ago, you're like, whoa.
Very quickly before we start this episode, did you know that 95% of Americans aren't getting enough fiber? Fiber is one of the most underrated tools for better health. It supports gut health, balances blood sugar, helps regulate hormones, and keeps you feeling full and energized throughout the day. To help combat this, we put together a free guide on our top 10 facts about fiber, packed with tips, food lists, and even a daily tracker to help get you started. Download your free guide today and start supporting your digestion, metabolism, and overall vitality, one fiber-rich bite at a time. You can click the link in our show notes or head over to theartoflivingwell.us/fiber.
Welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast, where we empower you to take charge of your health and happiness. We're Marnie
and Stephanie,
board-certified integrative health practitioners, holistic wellness coaches, and passionate explorers of all things mind, body, and soul.
Each week, we bring you expert insights, real-life stories, and practical tools to help you bridge the gap between where you are now and where you truly want to be. From longevity and nutrition to mindset, movement, and healing, we dive deep to uncover the root causes of wellness and vitality.
Join us and our growing community as we explore what it really means to create your art of living well in a way that's authentic, sustainable, and uniquely yours. Brought to you by Good Health Saunas, your key to relaxation, rejuvenation, and better health. Looking to feel amazing every day? Infrared saunas help you detox, support your immune system, ease muscle pain, and improve sleep, all while helping you sweat out the toxins. Stephanie and I love our sauna sessions. We sleep better, feel less stressed, and have noticed a big difference in our skin. We've had our Good Health sauna for the last 3 years, and we have loved using it in the mornings after we work out or in the evenings before bed. My husband uses it, my kids use it, and we just love a great sweat session.
Good Health Saunas delivers top-of-the-line infrared saunas with commercial-grade quality, a lifetime warranty, and unmatched customer service. Their team handles everything from purchase to setup, making your experience seamless. Good Health Saunas will ship and install anywhere in the United States, and you can also visit their stores at the Mall of America in Minnesota or in Appleton and Waukesha, Wisconsin. Get your exclusive discount at www.goodhealthsaunas.com. And be sure to mention the Art of Living Well podcast. Hi, Jamie. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. We love how we met through a previous guest, Jill Palmquist, who authored the most stunning coffee table book in this lifetime. Highly recommend that you guys go check out that episode, which I'll link up in the show notes, and check out the book too. But we instantly connected over our shared missions to empower people to live their healthiest, happiest, and most authentic life. So thank you for being here today.
I am really excited for this conversation. Thanks for having me.
So before we dive in, we love asking this question. If you could master one skill kind of instantly today, doesn't have to be health related, or it could be anything, what would it be?
It's funny. I've been listening to many of your podcasts, so I've had a preview kind of knowing you asked this. My initial response was playing the guitar. It's something that I have dreamed. I played piano my whole life. I've known, I can sit down and play a tune if I want to. But I've always had this desire to learn how to play another instrument. The guitar is one like my daughter has been learning and kind of self-teaching herself. And I'm like, ooh, that would be really fun. And then to be able to like sit around a campfire, strum a guitar, sing, that kind of thing. So I've singing is part of just like what I have done for all of my life. And then to be able to play guitar along with it would be fun. So
Okay,
that's
so
kind of what I was
you're
thinking.
never too late to learn.
I know. I know, right?
And I know we were talking before we hit record about empty nexting. That could be something that you look forward to when your oldest goes off to college or whatever.
I know. It's kind of
If not
starting to think
before.
about it. Yeah. As like I was telling you that my oldest daughter will be in high school. My youngest will be in 7th grade this year. And so I'm starting to feel like that, we're kind of reaching that transition age of them. Like it's not that far off. So what is going to be our next thing? And actually empty nexting is a phrase that a colleague of mine, Jen Elmquist, had shared with me several years ago. Her kids were kind of in that phase. And she's like, I really want to think about what is next in this phase versus feeling like it's empty. This nest is empty. What can we do with this time? And I've always just held on to that concept from her, and I always keep it in mind. So
I'm so glad you shared it today.
Yeah.
So, can you briefly share what brought you to the work that you're doing and, you know, what we're going to talk about today? Like what is the culmination of everything that brought you here?
yeah, I just recently, this past summer, celebrated 20 years with Lifetime. I have spent my entire career with this Healthy Way of Life company, and I feel really fortunate for that because, health and wellness have been values of mine since I was young. When I graduated from the University of Minnesota 20 some years ago now, I had told an adjunct professor at that time who I was very close with that my dream was always to work for a health and fitness magazine. And when I said that, that was like 3 or 4 weeks before I graduated. She happened to, at that time, be writing as a freelance writer for Experience Life magazine. And she knew the founding editor. So she was so kind. She made an introduction to Pilar Gerasimo, who's our founding editor. And it's kind of set the stage for everything. I have been with Experience Life since 2 weeks after graduating from the University of Minnesota. I started as an intern and was brought on full time 3 months later in a capacity to kind of just start delving into health and wellness as a fact checker. So I really got to dive deep into all the stories we were covering at the time. But also we were a really small team and that met lots of opportunities. So I was able to, experiment with digital opportunities and just kind of get my feet wet in a variety of different areas and which allowed me to kind of determine which way I wanted my career to go. And it was amazing because I did have that opportunity at Lifetime to do that over those years. So, fast forward many years later, I started running all the digital, properties that Experience Life was in charge of. We launched all of our social channels, but always had a foot in editorial on that side. So when Pilar ultimately decided to step away, she had kind of been almost preparing me for that role. And so I've been in the role of editor-in-chief since 2016, and my role has just continued to evolve with Lifetime to be covering all of these health and wellness concepts that we're so passionate about. I mean, that is what has kept me at this company and with this magazine for that long. I just care so much about the work that we're doing and how it helps people live healthier, happier lives, as you said at the top of the episode.
So amazing. I mean, it sounds like a dream job. Like to me, it sounds amazing. So, I mean, I remember Stephanie and I have talked about this a lot, but I used to I don't I don't get the magazine anymore, but I should. But I remember when I did get the magazine, I just loved it. And we had Pilar on our show a number of years ago, early on in the podcast, and she was so wonderful. So for you to be able to learn from her and almost have her mentor you, like what an amazing gift.
Absolutely. And that's truly is what it was. I learned so much from Pilar. As I was growing up, I was reading magazines. I remember getting like Self magazine and I would read all the stories in there. And I thought I knew a lot about health and wellness. I was always athletic. I was fit. I was learning things. But coming to Experience Life and getting to learn about kind of like what are the challenges with health and wellness? And that was something like there's so many quick fix gimmicks out there. Like you hear like these trends, like and so many magazine covers even back then were like, 6 weeks to your abs or whatever. And it's like we all know that these quick fixes don't really work. So I was so lucky pretty early in my 20s to be able to learn about health and wellness, like why it's so important to understand our bodies, how they're functioning, to know my unique body, and what works for me may not work for the next person. And so I just got to learn so much with Pilar and continue to just evolve from there. To have this kind of foundational, functional wellness perspective has been really transformative for me personally and also just really rewarding professionally.
Well, that is such a great segue to where we kind of want to take this conversation a bit. And just to back up, we will link up Pilar's episode in the show notes because for anyone out there that didn't listen, it will give you an appreciation for, I think, what Jamie's even starting to talk about too, and just getting into her background. But experience life, that's one of the things that when I came across it, when I moved to Minnesota and joined Lifetime many years ago, always promoting this balanced approach to wellness. And you're right, no quick fixes like all those magazines that I remember reading in high school. I just do these ab exercises for, 10 days. I'm going to look like that model, right? And so, why do you think this model is more sustainable and realistic versus chasing these extremes out there?
Well, I mean, I think what we have seen over the years is that there's this continual, we're trying something and then we're failing. We're falling off that bandwagon a little bit. It's really no different than New Year's resolutions. We often, we start the new year with this New Year's resolution that's really big and ambitious. What we are really all about is making sure we're giving people one small thing you can do today, maybe a little bit better than yesterday. Like we want to empower people with real, practical, proven steps that can help them truly live healthier in the long run. And that it doesn't mean it's easy, but it's like knowing kind of what's truly underneath and what's going to help you get to that next place. It's often not the gimmicky thing. It's kind of the thing you're gonna repeat over and over again. You have to we talk about the same topics all the time in the magazine. It's under a different headline all the time, but when it really comes down to it, it's movement, it's nutrition and how you feed your body and fuel your body and nourish it. It's community. It's how do you manage stress? How do you sleep? How do you get time in nature? We talk about these things with different topics wrapped around them all the time because they are just the foundation of healthy way of life. And there are nuances for all of us within each of those, and you're going to focus on them at different points in time depending on where you are. But it really does come back to those things that can seem boring. I've been doing that already. This quick fix thing over here, that's exciting. That's new. I want to try it. It worked for somebody else. So, but we always are just kind of coming back to that because we do know that that's what works in the long run. And that's what we can sustain in the long run, too.
It's so funny because listening to you talk, I mean, this is like it's the same stuff Stephanie and I talk about. Some may say ad nauseum, right? But like it's what we need to do every single day, over and over again. And it's not the quick fixes, but so we talk a lot about health span and not just lifespan. And I know you do as well. And what are some of your key habits or things that you recommend to people that they do that will kind of move that needle and not have you burn out in the process?
Well, it goes back to those foundational elements we just talked about. I mean, I think we talk about movement all the time with exercise under that umbrella. We know that's such a key part of it. And of course, then exercise breaks down more specifically. But, we want to exercise. We want to do that, 5 to 6 times a week, for 30 to 60 minutes, depending on where you are. But then it's like, what does that look like? How much strength training are you doing? How is that balanced with cardio and with mobility work that you're working on? Where does that fit in? But then it's also all the other movement that is wrapped around it. It's not just that hour maybe that you spend exercising. It's how are you incorporating movement into other aspects of your lives? I really love the work of Katie Bowman. She's been on this podcast in the past, on our podcast in the past, Lifetime Talks. And it's just like, she's like, how are you like getting up and moving in these different ways? I think that's key. And are you moving functionally well? I know I just listened to both of your episode on longevity and you talk about that. Like, I want to be able to chase after my grandkids someday down the road or put that suitcase in the overhead bin on the airplane. Those types of things. So there's the movement part, of course. There's the nutrition. And, that piece of it is how are you nourishing your body? We talk about those things again and again, and it's gone in phases. We've covered paleo, we've covered, Mediterranean, but really like, how are you getting more whole foods that look like they came from the earth versus been highly processed? How do you get more of that into your life? Stress management. How are we taking care of ourselves so that we're not in that constant burnout mode? I mean, we are in a fast paced culture. Like we need to figure out how to de-stress. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Nixon. It's about like the Dutch art of doing nothing. And it's like this whole idea is like, oh, we need to just slow down and give ourselves permission to do that. And what does that look like? So that's, that sleep. I heard you talk about sleep as well. Critical. These are the fundamental foundational things we have to be doing.
And I would just say going back to like doing nothing, I find that so difficult. Like that is probably one of the hardest things for me. And I feel like I'm still in that mindset where if I'm doing nothing, I'm not productive or I'm lazy. And that's so not true. Like sometimes you have to just sit on a hammock and look up at the sky and look at the clouds. And like in theory, it sounds amazing, but I struggle to actually do it.
I think a lot of people struggle with that one, almost more than even the sleep. And I mean, those things are also can be a struggle for people.
Yeah.
I literally was having this conversation with a young client the other day. So her goal is to spend 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes a day with nothing on. No music, no podcast, no book, nothing. Just walking or doing anything. And it's going to be a struggle for 15 minutes, right? That is hard for people. There's so much noise. And there is this thought like, if I'm not doing something, then I'm not good enough. It all goes back to your self-worth, really. And there's so much to unpack there, but I think that's a great challenge for people out there if you're not used to it, or even be in the car without having any audio on.
Yes, I find that to be some of my most productive time. I did that kind of unintentionally the other day as I was commuting. I realized I was halfway to work. I'm like, oh, I don't have anything on, but I've had all of these things going through my head that this was a good time for that. How do we do it? I mean, I picked up that book because I've been struggling with this myself. It's like if I'm not doing something, I feel like, am I being lazy or whatever that looks like? And it's not. It's actually really good for us. But we have so many easy ways to distract ourselves. Like I've gotten in the habit of like, if I'm not doing anything, I'll just grab my phone. I'm like, okay, instead of doing that, could I at least grab a book? And then can I if I really want to do nothing, can I get comfortable with just being there? That's kind of my next phase. It's like, I'm like, okay, grab a book instead initially. Now I'm like, okay, can I transition to doing nothing? We'll see. I'm only a couple chapters into the book, but I'm intrigued so far and ready to give it a try.
I'm going to add it to my list.
My Goodreads. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I struggle with this also.
You mentioned, picking up the phone, and this just reminded me. I saw this thing on Instagram a couple days ago, and if I can find it, I'll link it up here. But this photographer did this like study, and he took photos of people in community and people of families like today. And then he removed the cell phones from the photos. And it showed like one photo was so powerful. It was this couple that had just gotten married. They're standing like, outside of their fancy car, and they're apart from each other. They're maybe like 4 feet apart, and they're both looking down at their phones. They had just gotten married. And then, he removed the phone from the photo. So you just see them standing apart, like look in their own worlds, basically. Showed a family at dinner, all looking on their phones. It showed people outside, like at a sports game. They're looking at their phones. They're not watching their kid. It was so powerful. I was like, wow, this photographer is brilliant. Like this had an impact on me. So I'm going to try and find that.
We talked about this, I think, on a recent episode because I actually just put it in my family calendar. My husband was asking me about it. It was like phone free time. And we said, wouldn't it be great to do even like 3 hours on a Sunday? And so I just came to me. I think I must have been listening to our episode. I think it may have been the watch, read, listen we recently dropped.
I listened. I think that is the one. I was just listening to that one too. So
I put it in the calendar. My husband the other day goes, this phone free time, can we move the time in the calendar? We haven't done it yet.
This time doesn't work for me.
He gets it.
I need my phone during this time.
Yeah, sorry. But it's funny, we were in Europe and my husband and I were out to dinner by ourselves and my kids were with my mother-in-law at this one dinner. And my husband commented, he's like, look at that face. Like, okay, don't look now, but look at the family next to us. There's 4, 2 adults and 2 children, and they were all on their phones. And we're in a lovely location. We were in Sicily. And he's like, I'm so glad we decided not to give the kids like you can pay for the cell service because it's like $10+ a day. We have 3 kids. So the only time they could have their phone was connected to Wi-Fi back in the hotel. And we were talking, so it sparked up a conversation. And sometimes it's that awareness, not that we don't do that ourselves ever. I'm not trying to say we're perfect by any stretch, but it's the awareness when you see someone else doing it and you realize the impact. You're like, gosh, you have this precious family time. Why are you, 3 of you or 2 of you, on your phone? And our kids actually commented after that they really liked not having their phones. Like all day, they did not have their phone. If they needed something urgently, they would have to use ours. But they only had it for a little bit of time and they weren't even in their hotel rooms that much.
Right. I had an experience. We were actually, it's funny. I know you just did the Grand Canyon. A few years ago, my family traveled to Arizona and we drove to the Grand Canyon for a day. I left my phone at our Airbnb. And initially, I was kind of panicked about it. Ended up being the best day ever. I was like, other people can take photos, but I was not on my phone at all that day. And I was like, what a perfect day for it to be at the Grand Canyon without my phone and to like just take it in, right? And it ended up being this really great eye-opening day for me. I actually wrote about it in a letter in the magazine shortly after because it was initially like almost panic inducing, right? We're so used to it being right there and easy to grab. And I did go. There were a few times I would grab for it thinking it's there. But we need more of that. And I love that idea of phone-free time. I need to implement more of that in my life. As I said at the top of the episode, I have 2 daughters. They're, in their tweens and teens, and we all need that intentional time without devices.
Yep. And it's hard because we're all so addicted, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's a level of it that, I don't think we realize it, but it's really not. Is it any different than if we were, you know, smoking or any of those things? It's having an effect on our body. We know it's
Right.
affecting our brains.
Our mental
And
health.
our kids,
Yes.
right? It's,
Yep.
affecting our kids in ways that we don't even totally know. We're just starting to learn.
Yeah. Well, and I know you two recently talked about the anxious generation. I have kind of read Cliff Notes on it. I'll fully admit I haven't read it, but my sister has younger kids than I do. She got her whole small community in Wisconsin, like her oldest kids' age range, I should say, to commit to this like wait until eighth movement, where it's like wait until at least 8th grade to get your kid a cell phone. And after reading The Anxious Generation, just because we're of what all the research that's out there about this already. So on that note.
I do think there's going to be a trend. I'm hopeful because of the book and the movement of waiting and deferring and doing more of this phone-free time. And the things we're talking about, kind of getting back to the lifespan or the health span, lifespan, they're all free, these foundational things. And so someone may ask you, oh, are you doing this new trend or taking this new supplement? And like, that's sort of like the icing on the cake. That's what's going to get you maybe another 10, 15% there. But if you don't start with those things, Jamie, that you talked about, the movement and the functional movement, right? And the strength training and, water and sleep and just eating more whole foods, like forget all those other pills and gadgets are not going to get you where you really need to be. And they're free for the most part. It was funny. I was listening to a podcast, a Dr. Mark Hyman podcast the other day, and it's like these things are basically free.
I know. And you think of what we do spend.
There's a lot of things that are expensive. Right. And there are some things like even the saunas and the cold therapy. Yes, those cost money, but like let's just back up a bit before we just jump to the latest trend that we see on social media.
Yeah.
And it's not as like sexy or appealing necessarily, maybe,
But
but
the trends are fun, right? Like,
Right.
I love my sauna. Like, trend or not,
Right.
I love it.
Absolutely.
So,
like so much of a trend if you think about, because that's been around for, cultures in
yeah.
Finland and Sweden doing that for a long time. That's just like part of every household has one there, right? So it's a trend for us here more than it is
Elsewhere.
globally.
Absolutely. Well, I was just going to say, I think there's that question, like, what can we do for free? And then where are some of the like places that it's really worth it to spend the money to learn, like how you're doing from really under the hood. How's your health looking? And so that's where things like, certain lab tests, understanding your inflammation levels and what your blood sugar is at, where's your A1C, and some of those markers that can really help us get a feel for how we're doing, like what we can't see and feel physically, right? Like is it worth it? And how often is it worth it to test, like see where my vitamin D levels are in those pieces, or to ask for them as part of your preventive annual visit to your healthcare provider. Those are the times when I think, okay, how do we understand our bodies a little bit deeper so that we can make changes that might help them? We know so many people who are struggling with blood sugar control issues, like if we can understand that and begin to make some of the lifestyle changes potentially that could affect that, there's real benefit to that in the long term for our health span, right?
And you can even
I
think
agree.
about like a continuous glucose monitor.
Yes.
Those cost money, but you don't have to do it indefinitely. You could do it for a couple of months, gather the data, and then make the changes based on that data.
Yeah. Well, you just think about how you learned from that, and even just a couple weeks about like
Right.
noticing your patterns that start to happen, because then you have a choice, right? You kind of are seeing this. I can then decide how I'm going to eat or fuel my body later, or when I'm going to exercise. How is exercise affecting my body? You might see trends there too.
And it goes back to what you said early on is this bio individuality. And that's why the lab testing or some of these things we're talking about, and like the sleep devices, those are all super helpful too, whether it's an Aura Ring or a Whoop. But it's like what is going on inside your body so that you can focus and spend the money if you choose on the things that are going to impact you the most, not what someone else is doing that may not even be relevant for what's going on inside you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny because I will be, when I am on my device, I'll be on Instagram and like I'll be saving different things. I'm like, am I really ever going to do that workout? Probably not. Then I go
Yes.
back to my program where I'm like, okay, here's my actual program over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And there's that repetition within it. But it's still sometimes funny to see like, oh, that's interesting. That would mix it up, And sometimes I will throw them in there just to mix things up, to add a little bit of variety, because that keeps me engaged, right? So there's a
Well,
time and a place.
Well, and you know what I've really been using on Instagram in terms of movement and not so much workouts, but like mobility stuff, especially like with my feet and my ankles and, you know, strengthening my kneecaps and like things that I'm thinking about more now that I'm a hiker. And I've learned so much from like physical therapists on Instagram. It's kind of unbelievable, actually.
That's awesome. But think about it, your feet are your foundation, so that's awesome that
Totally.
you're like, "I'm gonna
Yes.
take care of those."
Right. Yep.
Because, man, what happened when we start to have issues with our feet? There is the start of our mobility, right?
Yep, and I'm obsessed with feet. Stephanie can attest to that.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
I've had foot issues, and so I'm, like, so set on getting my feet healthy and strong, which I think I'm doing.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it actually is really important. My son's going through some therapy right now with his feet, and he's 20.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
Early on. So, how can you figure it out now versus waiting another
yeah.
10 years even?
Let's face it, after a night out with friends, bouncing back the next morning isn't always easy. I used to feel like I had to choose between enjoying a drink and showing up the next day with energy. But then we discovered ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink, and everything changed.
ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic designed by PhD scientists to help you feel your best the day after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, an unwanted byproduct forms in your gut. That's what makes you feel off the next day, not dehydration.
ZBiotics is built to produce an enzyme that helps break down that byproduct. You simply drink ZBiotics as your first drink of the night, enjoy responsibly, and you're set up for a better tomorrow.
We've both had it before weddings, dinner parties, and girls' nights. And every time we wake up the next day feeling awesome, ready to hit the pickleball court or head out for a hike.
So as summer winds down, whether you're heading to a night out with friends or your next weekend getaway, don't forget to pack ZBiotics.
Go to zbiotics.com/AOLW.
For 15% off your first order.
It's backed by a 100% money-back guarantee, so you've got nothing to lose. Okay, so Jamie, we have a question for you. As a working mom, with 2 children, how do you personally navigate like the tension between showing up for your family and still carving out that time and space for your own health and well-being?
It's a challenge every single day, as you both know. The big thing for me is making sure I kind of get those foundational pieces. I feel like the things that have helped me be resilient over, whether it's been like a really acute, intense periods of time or just in these phases that have a lot going on, it's always come down to movement for me. I need to get my workouts in. That to me is my grounding, and I like to do it first thing in the morning. So I tend to be an early riser, and I do a balance right now of cardio and strength. And then I do try to take a few minutes to just like close my eyes and be a little bit mindful and just take a few deep breaths, right? Like that for me, when I can set the stage for my day that way is huge, because really it's after that workout's done that we are go. Like it's like we're all like which direction, who's where. I've said like my kids are at this stage of life where they're in everything, but they can't get themselves anywhere yet. Like there's no driver's license. So it's like, okay, we're chauffeurs or we're coordinating a carpool or grandma's helping somewhere. So the movement thing is huge for me. Again, it goes back to the basics. It's that whole like, how am I feeding my body? Because I do find on those days when I am grabbing quick things that I will end up being like in a snacky mode where I'm hungry all day long instead of like, okay, if I'm intentional about my meals and I take care of myself, I can fuel myself for those days in a much better way. So if I can take care of that. The other thing is just finding a little bit of quiet time every day for myself. I'm a big reader. Reading is my favorite hobby of all time. I love being able to just sit down and taking 30 minutes at the end of the day for myself. Once my girls are, they're up in their rooms doing their thing, my husband's doing his thing. It's like I just need 30 minutes to decompress. And I might read that book while I'm taking a hot bath, or I might be sitting in our sauna, doing that and just taking a little bit of time for me because when I don't get that little bit of time, I do feel like I'm just running on empty, and that really does help.
You know, this is such a common issue, and Marnie and I have seen it time and time again with our clients because I think and I'm gonna speak for women right now as a female and as a mom, not that dads don't have this same guilt, but there is this guilt and there is this
100%.
underlying need for a lot of moms to make sure that everyone else is happy first. And so you may even go away on vacation, but you come back and you're like, I'm exhausted because the whole time you were worried about everyone else's needs and making sure other people were happy or they had what they wanted. And how can we start to, what advice would you have for that listener out there that's like, yeah, that's great, Jamie, but I don't have time to wake up in the morning and work out and, be mindful and prepare a meal and all these things. Like, start to unpack, I guess, where that, belief is coming from, but then what can they do to start making like small little changes and start to see that actually putting on their own oxygen mask first is going to have a ripple effect on everyone else and actually benefit their family more than just doing everything for them, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that we have to be acknowledge that ticker is going through our minds all the time as women, right? I think it was Glennon Doyle that described it as that or something like, even though you can't see it, there's a constant like, this is next, this is next, this is what I've got going. And I mean, for me personally, I think it's really realizing we have to be willing to ask for help and not just try and do it all ourselves. That's a really hard thing to do when you're used to being super, super self sufficient, super mom, super self sufficient. I can do it all. I'm going to pretend I can do it all until I break. Right. And those moments they do happen. Right. Like it's like I can't take on anymore. And I think one of the biggest game changers for me has been willing to say like I can't do it all and also starting to say no to some of the things that really don't light me up. I think we hear that like no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain yourself. But I think there are certain boundaries that we have to start putting up, or maybe guardrails is a better word because you can put those up. They can always be moved, right? But how do you start to put some guardrails up around your time so that you can have a better put your energy in the places that it matters most, right? And it doesn't have to be huge, but sometimes it's as simple as a conversation with your partner about, hey, here's what I have in me right now. Here's what I have to give. I need help here. And just saying it. I know literally was this morning talking with my running buddy, my neighbor. It was a great friend of mine. And we were talking about like, why do we always have to ask for the help? Why don't they just see it that it needs to get done? Right. And the reality is you just sometimes need to ask instead of just assuming somebody knows, like assuming my kids know I want them to do this or assuming my husband knows. Like I just have to just be willing to ask and not have that
Yeah.
expectation.
Such great advice. But I would encourage everyone to like sit down and have a conversation with their family because when you get to the point that you're like about to lose it, then that's not the time, right? Because it's going to be fraught with emotions and no one's going to be happy. And just like I think our kids are, and your kids are, I mean, even 6, 7, 8 year olds can have a role in helping in the family dynamics. And a lot of times I'm like, well, why can't your kids maybe help with laundry or empty the dishwasher or, be responsible for a meal? And I was coaching this one client the other day and she's like, I'm going to have my kids like one night a week, they are going to make dinner. And not only is this helping us, but it's teaching them a life skill. And then they have this one meal that they're really good at and they can, they're like kids were like 18 and 20, so a little older. So kids actually thrive when you give them a role and responsibility and have a job versus just like telling them what to do. And then give them a little bit of freedom to be like, okay, within these parameters, you can make whatever you want. And they'll have a sense of pride with it. Like you're teaching them this really important life skill.
Was gonna say the other day, I'd had a really busy day, but I wanted to make a good dinner because takeout is no fun. And my daughter had just come back from what she was doing, and I really didn't feel like making dinner, but I was committed to making dinner. So I started chopping, and she's saying she's so hungry, and she's like, sitting on the couch doing whatever the heck she's doing. And I'm like, well, you could come help me chop, and dinner would come faster. She's like, I'm tired. I'm like, well, guess what? I'm tired too, but I'm still committed to putting food on the table. So then she like reluctantly, got up, and I gave her a task, and she knows how to cook. She's actually a very good cook. And then, all of a sudden we were just like cooking together, and she turned on some music, and it ended up being quite lovely. But it was just like getting her to take that step to be like, okay, I'm gonna get my butt off the couch and I'm going to go help my mom.
Well, what I was gonna add is tied to mealtime with my daughters too, because I took Monday off this last week. I spent an extra day in my hometown area in Wisconsin with my sister and her family, and we were at this little shop, and my oldest daughter picked up this cookbook, and it was something about, like, one-pot meal. She goes, "Mom, these look so good. If we got this cookbook, I would make these. I would do this." And it was like, "Oh, okay, there's a really fun, like, just kinda gift idea. Because if that's something that might inspire you to help and, like, hey, pick out 1 to 2 recipes a week and you can help with mealtime, or, we can how do we simplify things too? But just her excitement about that, I was like, "Oh, I need to tap into that because she's interested. I can leverage that to, for all of our benefit, I think, if I wanted to."
That's a great idea. And like Marnie, you said, like having that time with your kid in the
Yes.
kitchen, so valuable. And it's like anything else with a kid. They just need a little push, and they're not gonna do it on their own.
Right.
So you need a little bit of encouragement, and then once you get them in that activity, they're like, "Oh, this was actually really fun." It's like starting to run for the first time again, and then you feel really good after, but it sucks in the beginning.
Right. Well, I also feel like those are the moments the best conversations happen too with our kids when we're like, it's kind of like you get into that flow of like, you're doing this, I'm doing that, but we start to talk and like real conversation starts to happen. That's when I feel like I have like, oh, that's what's really going on right now in your life, versus the how is your day and all
Mhm.
this. It's like we get into it a little bit more when we have that time
Yeah.
together.
It's just more organic, and you're in flow, and you're not, like, looking them in the eye because 'cause you're both sort of doing parallel things.
Exactly. So one thing I was gonna mention is my husband and I, one of the things that we do together is we do therapy regularly. And one of the exercises we did with our therapist early on in our time together was we went through this deck of cards. It was tied to the book Fair Play. Have you heard of this book?
I've heard of the book.
So there's like this deck of cards that happens, and it kind of is all the cards that like would be all the to-dos in a household, right? And so, because we had been talking about how I was feeling overwhelmed with the ticker tape in my head and all these things. So we went through the exercise of kind of saying, like, well, who really kind of does what in our house? And like, what do we share? And it actually was a really good exercise because we ended up being more balanced than I expected. I was like, oh, you are doing more than I thought. And I'm doing these things that aren't always visible to you. Like, there's a lot of the stuff like, oh, I'm filling out the paperwork, doing this. You're, taking out the garbage, whatever. It's more visible to all of us. But I was like, oh, that was a really good check-in for me. And also the things that started the conversation of like, where do we get the kids involved more? And this was again a few years ago. They were younger then, but it's like, oh yeah, there's more opportunity there. But I just felt like it was a good grounding for both of us to say we are both doing a lot and how can we continue to support each other in this?
My husband and I have this same struggle conversation, and it's like he is doing a lot of things that, again, sometimes are visible, sometimes aren't. And same here, and we don't have that appreciation, and then one of us just thinks we're doing more than the other, and then we're not being appreciated for our time, and so I sometimes it takes this like, "Oh, let's go through some of the minutia."
Yes.
I mean,
And
Stephanie,
maybe
you and I have had that problem,
yes,
right?
same
Like, I
thing. I
mean,
think any
anyone
partnership.
in a partnership, I think, can
Right.
have that issue. That's
Yes.
a really good way of looking at it and appreciating what the other person's doing.
Yeah, it was so eye-opening
Yep.
for me. I felt like I ate a little crow that day. I was like, oh, because I had been being really hard on him. And I was like, okay, yes, this is more balanced than I expected. But yeah,
Right.
it was a good wake-up
Well,
call.
and I find sometimes, like, at least in my house, my partner's not even thinking about this stuff.
Right.
Like, it's not even on his radar.
Yep.
Like, he's just
Right.
going through his life.
Yep. Yep. And it's just like
And I'm the one who's like, "Oh my
you
gosh."
kind of have to
Like,
verbalize
gotta
it
do
more.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and it's like, what are your priorities? Like, sometimes my priorities are different than your
Right.
partners and vice versa, so
Exactly.
So what would you say you struggle with? Like, in terms of your health and wellness, or, like, where do you Yeah, where do you struggle? Someone would look at you and think, "Oh, she has it all. She's working for Lifetime and she's got this great job and these great kids and she's fit." And like, so what do you find challenging?
Sleep is challenging for me. That's one thing that I've been working a lot on. It's the first thing that will go for me, and it's when I also don't feel my best when I don't sleep enough. So I struggle with sleep because that's also, again, I tend to be an early riser and I will be a night owl. If I can't get that 30 minutes, I want to spend a little bit more time, but I will find myself compromising sleep, and that's hard for me to prioritize. I know I need to do better with that. Um, I'm also in the phase of, like, really wanting to work more on my connections, my community. I feel like I'm in such a busy phase of life with, like, my kids that I feel like some of my most important connections I haven't been able to nurture enough recently in my life in the last couple of years, and I've lost some really important people to me in the last couple of years, and it's just kind of made me, wake up, like, I need to do better with how I'm connecting because when I spend time, like, even just spending I spent this long weekend, like I said, in Wisconsin with my sister and her family. We haven't done that in multiple years, but it was such a good, like, concentrated window of time together. I'm like, we just need to connect more with our people. And I feel like that's where I've really struggled over the last few years. Just I've been so, we all kind of get in our own little world with the things that we have to do with our kids, with our family, but we have these communities that are around us supporting us. How do we make sure we're nurturing those to the best we can? I'm not perfect at it, but that's one opportunity that I find myself craving more of that in my life right now, like really wanting those connections with community.
And it sounds like what you're almost doing is like continuing to reassess your needs and your overall health and well-being within that bucket because connections and relationships are really, really important, as you know. And so I think that's another area for people as you go through different phases of your life, whether with work, with kids, whether you're going to be empty nexting, is continuing to reassess. And I think you really touched on why it's so important. Like maybe you lost some people and you're like, oh, this is now, I want to spend time with those people that are important, like your sister and her family.
Well, and I think it goes back to, and this is something Pilar introduced to me a long time ago, was kind of that whole life wheel concept. When you kind of look at all these areas of your life, and if like, if once a year you do it, kind of assessing like where am I doing really well? Where am I struggling? If I've got the whole habit of exercise down pretty well and movement, okay, I'm at a 10 on that, but I'm on a 2 on my connections. How do I, devote some time to that area? I'm seeing that as a gap, but also something that I'm feeling deeply within me. And so I think taking the time to reassess is so important. And it's that feedback loop in our lives of like, what are we craving? I think that is telling us something. There's something innate within us that's like there are signs and things that are leading us towards those things. And we have to be willing to listen. And I find myself that's one that I've really been feeling and wanting to spend some more time with. But that life wheel is key. Like at least once a year doing that to really see like how am I doing in these various areas?
I think that's such a good point. I mean, Marnie and I learned about that life wheel when we did our initial health coach training 10 plus years ago. And it's funny, I haven't like looked at that again recently, but it's like that continuous check in. And what you said was listening to yourself. And I think that goes back to having some quiet time and space. That's when truly when you can listen to yourself and
The
just
shower.
yourself.
That's like
The
my
shot, yeah.
quiet time. But
Absolutely.
I need to find it outside of the shower.
Yeah.
It's so
I
true.
always like to be outside to do
Yeah,
that
me
for me,
too.
like
But
quiet time.
sometimes I end up walking with a friend or listening to something but it is my quiet time stuff. If I don't get outside in nature every day, I'm like crabby.
Yes, you
Right.
need it.
And just ask yourself, like, what do I need? What do I need? And just sit with that question for a few
Mhm.
minutes and see what comes up for you. And every day it's going to change and every season it's going to change. And that's like the importance of continuing to reassess. And I love what you said, Jamie. Like, if you're a 10 and you know, like, exercise is going to happen every single day, to some degree, some form of movement, then don't focus on it so much. And maybe it's working really hard on the art of doing nothing or, like you said, relationships, whatever it is that you want to work
Yeah.
on and invest in that.
I love, like, just thinking about taking a few minutes for finding that. I think, again, I go back to Glennon Doyle a lot, but I think it was in her book Untamed where she talked about this whole, like, deep knowing. Like, she talked about how she went into her closet and, like, she's like, "When I really thought about it, like, I know what I need. I just have to be willing to sit with it, and let it come to the surface." And when we're busy, it's hard. You can push that knowing down because there's just all the to-dos. So it's like, how do we give it a little bit of space to breathe and come to the surface?
Such good insight. A lot to unpack and think about here for everyone.
Well, this has been so fun. I could talk all day long. I was just thinking about like
I
there's
know.
so many exciting things happening and like we're in this phase of, we're so connected to our devices. Like how do we use them to help us, not hinder us, right? And like again, finding a balance for that's right for each of us in this whatever stage of life that we're in.
As we start to wrap up this conversation, I know you've offered so many tips and little thoughts throughout the conversation, but is there anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with that maybe, a small takeaway that they could try out today, even?
I don't know if it's a small takeaway, but one of the things that I have had to get comfortable with over the years, well, I'll say, like when I first became editor in chief, I felt like I had to do it all perfectly, right? Like I'm the face of this thing and like there's this pressure and all that. And I think what's really helped me over the years is realize that you can never do everything perfectly, but like just be human, embrace your humanness within all of it. Like, no, like give yourself the grace that you can. Like, the reality is, I really do believe that most of us are really trying to do our best as that we can every day, and to give ourselves permission to do it imperfectly, to do that best imperfectly, because when we can just, we can still be striving to thrive and do all of those things in our lives, but know that we're going to run into struggles and give ourselves grace in them. And, maybe it's just taking a minute to talk about, like, really acknowledge, like, what's the one thing I struggled with today? And what might I do differently tomorrow? It might just be a little journaling prompt to start somebody because every day has some little challenge within it. And what can I learn from it? And then I can go ahead with tomorrow.
Yeah, like what? Because everybody does have a struggle each day. So, yeah, I might have to try that.
Yeah, and it's a good conversation, I would think, to have with your
Yeah.
kids. And you can initiate it as the parent, but what did I struggle with, and then what am I gonna do? Like, what did I learn from that situation, or what am I gonna try to do differently the following
Yeah,
day?
that's still one of my favorite traditions with my kids is, like, at bedtime, I'm like, "Okay, what was one happy, good thing that happened today? What was a hard thing? What was a funny thing?" Or, like, you can change it up, like, what it is, because then you just learn a little bit about what's happening in their day, and then they can push it back to you, and you can have that conversation too, and then maybe journal about it a little bit, but it's a good even dinner table conversation sometimes.
I agree, and we don't always do it, and then every once in a while, I'm like, "We're gonna do our rosebud thorn," and the kids are like, "Oh, mom, we have to do the because we haven't had as many, I guess, all sit-down family dinners t recently, but I think you learn so much about what's going on in your kid's life, even if they sort of begrudgingly answer, and it's still one of my favorite ways to have
I've
family
never heard it
conversation.
called rosebud thorn.
So a friend of mine's daughter said this. So your rose was like the
Yeah.
highlight of the day. The thorn is, but the bud is what you're looking forward to tomorrow or later that night. That's the bud because it like hasn't fully happened
I
yet.
love that so much.
We call it the highs and lows.
Well, we used to do that, but then I learned the rosebud thorn, and then it gives you one more thing to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
To
like
talk
that.
through. I just heard about that this last weekend. Somebody was talking about it that I was with. I'm like, "Oh, there we go. There it is." So, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I love it.
Jamie, we know you're the editor in chief at Experience Life magazine, but can you share how people can find you? How can they follow along? And also, you don't have to be a member of Lifetime to subscribe and get the actual magazine because I still get it and I love it. Um, and I'm old school with my paper. I don't want to read everything on my phone. So,
Which we love. We love when people will get that hard copy. It does give you like that physical feel. There's nothing quite like opening a magazine or a book and having that. So, yes, you can subscribe to Experience Life at experiencelife.com. Again, you don't have to be a member for that. You can find like a lot of my columns there. I'm also on the Lifetime Talks podcast. I'm co-host of that. We're starting our 11th season just right now, this time of year. So it'll be kind of rolling out when this episode airs. And that will go through the end of this year. And you can find me at Jamie Martin EL on Instagram. It's where I do a lot. You're gonna see my family is my priority. You're gonna see them there, and just other little tidbits from life and health and wellness tips and things like that. I'm really working on kind of putting myself out there a little more in those spaces. But yeah, Experience Life and at Lifetime too. You'll find me there.
Awesome. And we'll link all that up in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation.
Well, and we have one more question for you, Jamie.
Great. Look at me. I'm like trying to tie it.
Yeah,
like
you're
I want
wrapping
my
up,
own podcast.
wrapping up on us. So, what does the art of living well mean to you?
I think the art of living well is being authentic, being authentically you. I think when we show up as ourselves, we do the things we love, we embrace the things we love, we spend time with the people we love. And I think there's just when we're being authentic in that, I think it kind of leads to that next, thing that's well for us and well and good for us. So, I mean, if anything I've learned over the years, it's like when I try to do something else or try to put on somebody else's shoes, things don't work as well. And so I really think it's about being who you truly are and continually being willing to learn about who that is and knowing it's going to evolve over time.
Oh, beautiful. You said that so well. And the part that like continuing to evolve and know that that's going to change over time and be willing to embrace whatever new changes that you have, right, in your life. So
One of the things I wrote about in a column way back when was this whole idea of change. And I'm just going to, just quickly, if you don't mind, it was just like, okay, if you ask yourself right now, what's going to change in the next 10 years? We often will say not a lot's going to change because like, oh, I've got this, I've been with this group of friends, I'm at this stage of life. But then when you look back at where you were 10 years ago, you're like, whoa, so much has changed. Like, so it's like, if we are just willing to see like, we're not, we're not just stable beings right here. Like there's always something shifting and changing. And if we can just be okay with that and know, I'm not who I was when I was 20, I'm not going to be who I will be when I'm 60.
And to appreciate your growth, right? Like, look back, and that's such a good exercise also. Like, I would love to go back and see, where was I when I was 42? What was I doing? How was I feeling? What was I thinking? Was I kind to myself? Was I hard on myself? Like, just kind of going through that and seeing my own personal evolution over time. I can see the value in that.
well, and sometimes we're so hard on ourselves that we don't realize how much growth we've experienced.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to be anything super crazy, but just like Marnie said, am I kind to myself? I think a lot of women are really hard on themselves. So have you softened up a bit as you age? Maybe that's a huge accomplishment for you based on where you were.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on our show. We could, like you said, we could keep talking.
We could just keep
forever
chatting.
and ever because our missions are so aligned.
They're so similar. I love it.
We just wish you a wonderful summer. Embrace and enjoy those kiddos while you can.
Mhm.
Yes, I will. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Art of Living Well podcast. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It helps more people discover our show.
And if you're ready to take your health and happiness to the next level, we would love to support you. Whether it's through our transformative group programs, personalized coaching, or functional medicine lab testing, we help uncover the root causes of your health challenges and unlock your vitality.
Visit www.theartoflivingwell.us to learn more and book a free discovery call. Until next time, keep creating your art of living well.